Nobody came to my 40th birthday. 40 years old, and I sat alone in the back room of a diner with a cake that spelled my own name wrong. Wesley. A paper banner I'd hung myself, and 11 empty chairs I'd reserved for 11 people who all found somewhere better to be. My name is Wesley Hartman. I build things for a living. Kitchens, cabinets, staircases, whole homes for other families. And I couldn't fill one small room for one small birthday. My brother texted, "Wish I could, bud." My best man hadn't spoken to me in 2 years. The candles burned down while I did the loneliest math a man can do at 40. Not who didn't show up, but who did I stop showing up for. First, I reached for my coat to go home to an empty house, but then the bell over the door rang, and my ex-wife walked in holding a little boy's hand. Delia, 4 years gone. The woman who left me in a driveway believing I was made of stone, standing there in a green coat I'd never seen, snow melting in her hair, and that small hand wrapped around hers, the child with the pom-pom hat, staring straight at me. Whose son was he? She didn't plan to come. She said so. So why was she here, on this night of all nights, at the one party nobody came to? Who was the little boy holding her hand? Why did the woman who swore I never loved her walk back through my door after 4 years of silence? And why, when I'd lost everything that mattered in one painted empty room, did she bring him? Let me take you back 3 hours, so you understand what she walked into. I'd closed the shop early that day. That never happens. There's always a drawer that sticks, a hinge that sings, a countertop somebody needs by Friday. But it was my birthday, and for the first time in 4 years I'd let myself hope for something. So I swept the sawdust, hung my apron on its nail, and locked the door with my heart doing this small, stupid, hopeful thing in my chest. I'd planned it for weeks. I know how that sounds. A grown man planning his own party like a kid. But I'd been alone so long that the loneliness had started to feel like a room I couldn't find the door out of. And I thought, 40. 40 is the year I climb back out. I'll call the guys. I'll call my brother. I'll fill a room with people again. And I'll remember how to be a person. I picked Sorrel's because it felt safe. It's the diner on 4th Street where the coffee's been the same since I was a boy, where the booths are cracked red leather patched with tape, where the whole place smells like burnt sugar and bacon grease and rain on the welcome mat. The owner, Sorrel herself, is 71 and calls everyone Hon. She let me have the back room for free. "For your birthday, Hon," she said, and patted my cheek with a hand soft as bread dough, and I had to look away, because kindness undoes me faster than cruelty ever could. I decorated it myself. That's the part I can barely say out loud. I bought a paper banner from the drugstore, the kind that comes folded flat in a little sleeve. I climbed on a chair and hung it with 2 thumbtacks, and I made sure it was level. Of course I made it level. I'm a carpenter. I can't hang anything crooked. It physically hurts me. I set out plates. I made little place cards for everyone, printed their names, and, God help me, I sanded the edges smooth so they wouldn't catch anybody's fingers. Who does that? Who sands a place card? A lonely man does that. A man who has forgotten how to be needed pours all that need into the wood grain of a thing nobody asked him to make. And the cake. I'd ordered it 3 days early. When I picked it up that afternoon, the girl behind the counter turned the box around to show me, proud, and there it was in blue frosting. "Happy birthday, Wesley." I opened my mouth to tell her, and then I didn't. Because correcting it would have meant standing there while she fixed it, and I couldn't bear one more person doing one more thing for me out of pity. So I said, "It's perfect. Thank you." And I carried my own misspelled birthday cake to my own empty party. And that sentence is the truest thing I know about who I'd become. 7 o'clock came. I sat at the head of the table in my good shirt. The green flannel Delia used to say brought out something in my eyes, though she was long gone, and had no way of knowing I still wore it when I wanted to feel like the man she'd married. I folded my hands. I watched the door. 7:10. I told myself people run late. Everybody runs late. 7:20. I ate a mint from the little bowl by the register so my mouth would have something to do. 7:30. My phone buzzed. My chest jumped. Someone's coming. Someone's on their way. And I grabbed it so fast I nearly knocked over my water. It was my brother, Dean, in Tucson. "Happy birthday, bud. Wish I could be there." Things are crazy here. Next year for sure. Next year for sure. He'd said that last year too. And here's the thing I need you to understand. Because it's the whole ache of my life. Dean wasn't lying. And Dean wasn't cruel. Dean loved me. But somewhere in the last 4 years, I'd taught him not to worry about me. Every time he'd called, I'd said I'm fine. Every time he'd asked how I was doing, I'd said good. Busy. You know me. Always working. I'd said it so many times that he finally believed me. I built that wall myself, one I'm fine at a time. And then I sat behind it, alone on my birthday, wondering why nobody could reach me. 7:40. I looked at the 11 empty chairs. I looked at the 11 sanded place cards. Marcus, my best man, the guy who stood beside me at my wedding and cried harder than I did, his card sat in front of an empty chair. I hadn't called Marcus in 2 years. Not because we fought, because I let one unreturned voicemail become 2, and 2 become a month, and a month become a silence so wide I didn't know how to shout across it anymore. He didn't abandon me. I just stopped answering. And eventually a man takes the hint he was never actually given. That's not a party nobody came to. That's a life I'd quietly emptied, one person at a time, and only noticed now that the room echoed. I felt something rising in my throat, hot and thick, and I pressed the heels of my hands against my eyes, because I was not going to cry in the back room of Sorrel's diner on my 40th birthday. I was a grown man. I built houses. I could survive one bad night. I lit the candles, all 40 of them. I'd bought the number 4 and the number 0, thank God. I couldn't have fit 40 on that cake. I lit them because it felt like the thing you're supposed to do. And because for about 10 seconds the little room glowed warm and gold and almost looked like a celebration. Then I sat there and watched them burn. Nobody to sing, nobody to tell me to make a wish, just wax sliding down into blue frosting over a name that wasn't even mine, and the drip of the coffee machine out front, and Sorrel's radio playing something soft and old, and the snow ticking against the dark window like fingers that couldn't quite get in. I made a wish anyway. You want to know what a 40-year-old man wishes for, alone, over a misspelled cake? I didn't wish for the guys to show up. I didn't wish for Marcus or Dean. I closed my eyes, and I wished, the way you wish for something you know you're not allowed to have, that I could go back 4 years and open my mouth. Just once. That I could stand in that driveway again and say the words that had been trapped in my chest like a splinter under the skin. The words I never said. The words that would have changed everything. I wished I'd told her the truth. And I blew out the candles. The room went dark and smoky, and I sat in it, and I reached for my coat, because there is a moment on a night like this where hope finally dies quietly, and you decide to just go home and let the day be over. That's when the bell over the front door rang. I almost didn't turn around. Bells ring all night at a diner. It was probably somebody grabbing pie to go. A trucker. A couple out of the cold. I told myself not to hope. I'd hoped enough for one night. I didn't have any left. But then I heard the footsteps. You'd think 4 years would erase the sound of how somebody walks. It doesn't. It lives somewhere deeper than memory. Somewhere in the body. I knew those footsteps before my mind caught up to my heart, and my whole chest went tight and strange, and I turned around in my chair. Delia came around the wooden partition. The green coat first. New, one I'd never seen. And stupidly that's what got me, that she'd lived 4 whole years of buying coats I'd never know about. Then her face, pink from the cold, snow melting in her dark hair, catching the light like tiny stars going out. She stopped when she saw me. She stopped like she'd walked into a wall. And she wasn't alone. There was a little boy holding her hand. Small, 3 years old maybe, bundled in a puffy blue jacket, a knit hat with a white pom-pom on top, one mitten on his hand and the other clipped to his sleeve and dangling. His cheeks were round and red, and he was doing the thing little kids do, half hiding behind her leg, one eye peeking out, staring straight at me with the fearless, bottomless curiosity that only children have. Nobody said anything. The radio played. The snow ticked the window. "Wes," she said. "Just my name. One word." But Delia could always fit a whole paragraph into one word. And in that one, Wes, I heard surprise, and something breaking open, and 4 years of things unsaid. "Delia," My voice came out like gravel. I hadn't spoken in 3 hours. How? What are you doing here? She glanced at the banner, at the 40 candles smoking on the cake, at the 10 other empty chairs, and the 10 other sanded place cards, and the terrible, obvious math of the room. 1 man, 1 cake, no guests. I watched her take it all in, and I watched her understand it, and I watched something in her face just crumble at the edges, gentle and awful, because Delia was never able to hide what she felt. Not once in all the years I knew her. That was always the difference between us. She showed everything. I showed nothing, and it cost us the whole world. I didn't plan this, she said quickly, like she needed me to know. I swear I didn't. We were walking to the car, and Theo was hungry, and Sorrel's was right there, and they have that chalkboard out front, where they write the reservations. She swallowed, and I saw your name on it, in chalk. Back room, Hartman party, 7 p.m. Her eyes went shining and wet, and I stood on the sidewalk in the snow, and I told myself to just walk to the car. Delia, just go home. But I couldn't. I couldn't walk away from your name. The little boy tugged her hand, and then, in that too loud whisper children think is quiet, he said, "Mama, is that the man with the empty party?" I laughed. I didn't mean to. It burst out of me, cracked and wet and startled. Because kids don't know you're not supposed to say the true thing out loud. He'd looked at that room, the banner, the candles, the 10 empty chairs, and he'd named it exactly, with no cruelty at all, the way only a child can hand you your own broken heart and somehow make it lighter to hold. Delia's cheeks went even redder. "Theo, it's okay," I said. And to my own surprise, it was. "Yeah, buddy, that's me, the man with the empty party." He considered me with enormous seriousness, the way 3-year-olds weigh the important things. Then he pointed one small mittened hand at the cake. "You have too much cake," he informed me. "For one guy." "I really do," I said. "I have way too much cake for one guy." He looked up at Delia, and it wasn't a small look. It was a real one, a question passing between them, some private language they'd built together. His eyes asked something, and Delia, she hesitated. I watched her hesitate. I watched 4 years and a green coat and a whole life I knew nothing about pass behind her eyes while she decided. Then she nodded, and they stayed. She helped him up onto the cracked red bench across from me, unzipped the puffy jacket, pulled the pom-pom hat off so his fine brown hair stood straight up with static. He was already reaching for the cake before he was even settled, and Delia caught his hand. We asked first. And he turned to me with the gravest, most hopeful face I have ever seen on a human being. "Can I please have the birthday cake, mister? Please." Something happened in my chest that I didn't have a name for. 4 years of silence. 4 years of building things nobody sat at. 4 years of hanging my apron on its nail and going home to a dark house. And here was a small stranger asking me, "Please, mister, for a piece of a cake with the wrong name on it." "You can have the first piece," I said. My voice wasn't working right. Birthday rule. The youngest guest always gets the first piece. His whole face lit up like I'd handed him the moon. Delia looked at me over the top of his head, and she didn't say thank you with her mouth. She said it with her eyes, the way she used to, back when we could still read each other, back before we forgot how. I found a knife, and my hands weren't steady, so I focused on the cut, the way I focus on a difficult joint in the shop. Measure, breathe, let the tool do the work. I cut a corner piece, the one with the most frosting, and slid it onto a plate, and set it in front of a 3-year-old boy I'd never met, in the back room of a diner, at the party nobody came to. He didn't use the fork. He grabbed the cake in his fist and shoved it at his mouth and got blue frosting from his chin to his eyebrows, and he closed his eyes and made a sound of pure animal joy, and Delia laughed. That laugh, that same laugh. God, I'd forgotten I could recognize a laugh like you recognize your own name, and I had to turn and look at the black window for a second so neither of them would see what my face was doing. Because here is what I understood. Sitting there. This was the most people I'd had at a table in 4 years. A woman who'd left me. A little boy I didn't know. Frosting everywhere. And it was, without any competition, the best birthday of my adult life. And I didn't even understand yet how or why it was happening. I just knew the room wasn't echoing anymore. So, I managed, when I could talk. I nodded at the boy. Careful, casual, the way you step slow around a deer so it won't bolt. This is Theo. This is Theo, Delia said, and there was something guarded in how she said it. Something she was holding. I started, and didn't know how to finish. He's beautiful. He's yours. He's how old? Whose is he? Where did he come from? What happened to you in 4 years? What happened to us? All of it stacked up behind my teeth. And, old habit, the habit that ruined my life, I said none of it. But Delia saw. She always saw. He's mine, she said quietly. She reached over and wiped frosting off his chin with a napkin, and he squirmed away, and she let him. He's been mine for almost 2 years now. 2 years. I did the math before I could stop myself. We'd been divorced 4. Which meant he wasn't. I looked at the boy. Really looked. And I felt the ground tilt under me, because for one terrible, hopeful, shameful second, my heart leapt to a conclusion my head hadn't finished thinking, and I heard myself almost ask the question, is he? And I bit it back so hard I tasted blood. Delia watched my face do the whole thing, every bit of it, and her eyes went soft and sad and knowing. No, Wes, she said gently, barely above a whisper so the boy wouldn't hear, wouldn't understand. He's not ours. He's not. It's not what you're thinking, and I don't know what was worse. The crash of relief or the crash of grief, both at once, because ours was a word we had buried in a painted, empty room 4 years ago, and neither of us had said it out loud since, and now it was sitting on the table between us next to a half-eaten cake. Then, my throat closed. I tried again. Then where did he come from? Delia opened her mouth to answer, and Theo, blue-faced with frosting, blissed out, kicking his feet under the table, chose that exact moment to look up at me with his whole open heart and announce, to the entire room, the one thing that stopped my breathing completely. Mama said you build houses. He beamed. Can you build me one? With an extra door? I already know where the extra door goes. I drawed it. I looked at Delia. Delia had gone completely still, the napkin frozen in her hand, her face white. What extra door? I said, and she didn't answer me. She just looked at her son, at this small boy with the wild static hair and the frosting grin, and her eyes filled all the way up and spilled over, silent, 2 tears sliding down her cold pink cheeks, and she pressed her lips together like she was holding a door shut against something 4 years in the making. Delia, I said. My heart was pounding now. What door? What did he draw? She wiped her eyes fast with the back of her hand. She looked at me, and when she spoke, her voice shook. Wes, there's a reason I couldn't walk past your name on that chalkboard tonight. She took a breath that trembled going in. There's something I never told you. Something about why I really left. And I've been carrying it for 4 years, and I think I need to finally. The bell over the front door rang again. Sorrel's voice floated back from the front. Sit anywhere, hun. I'll be right with you. And Delia stopped. She looked toward the sound. She looked at Theo, frosting-faced and oblivious. She looked at me, and I watched her lose her nerve. Watched 4 years of a locked door, almost open, and then hold. And she shook her head fast, and forced a smile, and said, Not here. Not like this. Delia, eat your cake, baby, she said to Theo, too brightly, her voice cracking right down the middle, and she looked at me across a table full of everything we'd never said, and I knew, the way you know a storm is coming by the smell of the air, that whatever she'd almost told me was going to break my heart wide open. I just didn't know yet if it would break it to pieces, or finally, after 4 years, put it back together. They stayed for another hour. I want you to understand what that hour did to me, because I'd been starving for so long I'd forgotten I was hungry. That's what loneliness does. It doesn't feel like pain after a while. It just feels like normal. You forget there was ever anything else. And then, a 3-year-old wipes frosting on your sleeve and asks you if trees are alive, and you feel the whole frozen thing inside your chest start to crack, and you realize you've been cold for 4 years without knowing it. Theo talked the entire time. About everything. About his blanket named Bear, which was not a bear, it was a blanket, but its name was Bear. And he explained this to me, with the patience of a man explaining something very simple to someone very slow. About how he could count to 20, but sometimes skipped 15, because 15 was a boring number. About how he didn't like the crust on bread, but Mama said the crust made you strong, so he ate it, but under protest. And Delia watched us. She sat with her coffee going cold, that new green coat still on like she wasn't sure how long she was staying, and she watched her son talk to me, and I couldn't read her face. That was new. I used to be able to read every weather system that crossed Delia's face. Now there were clouds I didn't recognize, coming from directions I didn't know, but every few minutes, Theo would say something small, something ordinary, and I'd watch her go still. When he asked if I could build him a house, when he called me the cake man, when he put his small, sticky hand flat on the back of mine to point at the salt shaker, and left it there a second too long, the way kids do when they've already decided about you before they should. Each time, Delia's eyes would go somewhere far away, somewhere 4 years deep. She was carrying something. I knew it the way you know, a beam is bearing too much weight. You can't always see it, but you can feel the whole house holding its breath. Then Theo yawned. One of those enormous, jaw-cracking, whole-body yawns that hit little kids like a wave. And Delia looked at her watch, and her face changed. "Okay, baby, it's way past. We have to go." "No," Theo said, with the bottomless despair only a tired 3-year-old can summon. "No, I'm not tired. I'm—" And then he yawned again, betrayed by his own body. And I laughed, and Delia laughed, and for 1 second we laughed together. The way we used to, and both of us heard it, and both of us stopped at the exact same time. 4 years is a long time to not hear a sound you used to make every day. She bundled him up. Pom-pom hat, mitten clipped to the sleeve, zipper all the way to his chin, so only his frosting-stained face poked out. He was already going boneless with sleep, that heavy, melting sleep that takes children mid-sentence. By the time she hoisted him onto her hip, he was out, cheek mashed against her shoulder, mouth open, one hand fisted in the collar of her coat. I walked them out. I didn't ask if I could. I just stood up and grabbed my coat, the coat I'd reached for an hour ago to go home alone, and I followed them through the diner, past Sorrel, who looked up from the register and took in the whole picture, the woman and the sleeping boy, and me trailing after them, and something moved across her old face. She didn't say anything, she just caught my eye and gave me the smallest nod. Like, "Go on, hun. Go on." The cold hit like a wall when we stepped outside. It had stopped snowing, but everything was buried soft and white and blue under the streetlight. The whole street hushed the way the world only gets when snow has swallowed all the noise. Our breath came out in clouds. The parking lot was empty except for one small silver car with a car seat in the back, dusted white, and the buzz of the streetlight overhead, and the two of us, and the sleeping boy between us. Delia unlocked the car. She opened the back door and started the careful, complicated work of lowering a sleeping child into a car seat without waking him. That little dance every parent knows, the slow bend, the held breath, the click of the buckle done by feel. And I stood there in the cold and I felt the hour ending. I felt her about to drive away. 4 years ago, I'd stood in a driveway and let her drive away without saying the thing. And I'd spent every day since living inside the silence, where those words should have been. And something in me, the part that was tired, the part that had blown out 40 candles alone, the part that had wished, just an hour ago, to go back and open my mouth just once. Something in me said, "Not again. Not this time. You do not let her drive away again, with the truth still stuck in your chest." Delia. She straightened up from the car seat, turned around. The streetlight caught the side of her face. "I have to tell you something," I said. "And I'm going to do it badly, because I do everything badly except build things. But I have to say it anyway, or I'll spend another 4 years wishing I had." She went very still. Her hand stayed on the top of the car door. "Okay," she said quietly. And now that the moment was here, my throat locked. All those old muscles, all those years of training, every instinct in my body screaming, "Don't. Don't say it. Stay safe. Stay quiet. A man carries it alone." I felt the silence rising up in me like it always did. The silence that was easier. The silence that had cost me everything. And I looked at the sleeping boy in the car, and I thought about him asking me to build a house with an extra door, and I opened my mouth, and I broke the habit of my whole life. I wanted him, I said. Delia's face didn't move, but her hand tightened on the car door. Our baby, I said, and my voice came apart on the word. 4 years of it, all at once. The one we lost. I wanted him so much I couldn't breathe. And I know, you think I didn't. I know you left believing I didn't care, that I was cold, that I was made of stone. You said it, in the driveway. You said you never even wanted him, Wesley. And I stood there and I let you believe it. And that is the worst thing I have ever done in my life. Her lips parted. The cloud of her breath stopped in the air. I didn't go to the ultrasounds, I said. You remember, the 2 big ones, near the end. I told you I had jobs. I told you I couldn't get away. I shook my head, and I felt the tears come, hot on my cold face, and for once in my life I didn't fight them. I sat in the truck, Delia, both times, in the parking lot of the doctor's office. I drove there. I parked. And I couldn't make my legs work. I sat in that truck with my hands on the wheel, and I shook. Because I wanted it so bad, and I was so scared that wanting something that much would jinx it, would break it, that if I walked in there and saw him on that screen, and let myself love him all the way, then, my voice gave out completely. Then I'd have that much more to lose, I whispered. And then we lost him anyway, and I was right, and I've hated myself for being right ever since. Delia made a sound, small, like something tearing. When we lost him, I went on, because now that the door was open I couldn't stop. 4 years came pouring through it. I didn't know how to be in that house. We'd painted the room. Remember? That yellow. You picked it. And every time I walked past that door I couldn't breathe, Delia. So I left. Every morning before you woke up, I took every job, every double, every drive to every far town, and I came home after you were asleep, so I wouldn't have to see your face, because your face had all the grief in it that I couldn't let out of mine. And I told myself I was being strong. I told myself I was holding us up, keeping the money coming, being a man about it. I looked at her, really looked, 4 years of it. But I wasn't being strong. I was running. I left you alone in a house with a painted empty room and a husband who wouldn't say one word. And I let you carry all of it by yourself. And then I let you leave, thinking I never cared. The tears were running now, and I didn't wipe them. You didn't lose one thing that year, Delia. You lost 2. You lost our son. And you lost me, because I disappeared right when you needed me. And I called it love. The streetlight buzzed. Somewhere far off a plow scraped a street. Delia stood there with her back against the car and her hand pressed over her mouth. And she was crying, silent, the tears just falling. And when she finally took her hand away, her voice was wrecked. You sat in the truck, she said, both times. You sat in the parking lot, Wesley. And you never, her voice cracked. In 4 years. 4 years. You never told me. You let me walk around this whole time thinking I married a man who didn't want his own child. You let me hate you for the one thing that wasn't even true. I know. Why? And it came out of her like a wound. Why would you let me believe that? Why would you carry that alone for 4 years and let it poison everything, when all you had to do was, because saying it out loud made it real, I said. Because if I said I wanted him, then I had to feel that I lost him, and I didn't know how to feel that, and keep standing up. So I locked it in a room, and I bricked up the door, and I told everybody I was fine. My brother, my friends, you. I said I'm fine so many times that everybody finally believed me and left me alone. Which is exactly what I asked for, and exactly what broke me. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. Rough. I found out something this year, Delia. I found out you can't lock up just the grief. When you brick up that room, you brick up everything. The love too. The joy too. All of it. Sealed in the dark. I've been walking around a locked house for 4 years, and calling it peace. She was quiet for a long moment. The snow, the streetlight, the boy asleep in the car. Then she said something that took my legs out from under me. I begged you to get help. Her voice was shaking. Do you remember that? Before I left, I found the number. I wrote it on the pad by the phone. I said, Wesley, please, let's just go talk to someone. Let's go together. And I remembered. God help me, I remembered. You went twice, she said. Twice. And you sat in that chair with your arms crossed like this. She folded her arms across her chest, tight, defensive, and I recognized myself in it. And it made me sick. And you looked at the floor, and when he asked you a question, you said, I'm fine. This is really more her thing. Her voice broke on it. Her thing. Like our dead son was my thing. And you never went back. And I sat in that room alone with a stranger and cried. And I came home, and you were at work. Again. Always at work. I know, I whispered. I didn't leave because you were cold, Wesley. She was crying hard now, the words tumbling out. 4 years of them. Same as mine. I told myself that, because cold was easier to leave than the truth. The truth was, I left because I was drowning, and I reached for you, and you weren't there. Over and over. I reached, and my own husband would not reach back. And a person can only reach into the dark so many times before they stop reaching. That's why I left. Not because you didn't feel anything, because I couldn't feel you feeling it. You never let me see. And a woman can't stay married to a locked door. And there it was. Everything. Laid out in the snow between us. Under the streetlight. 4 years too late. We hadn't split because one of us was bad. We hadn't split because somebody cheated, or somebody lied, or somebody stopped loving. We'd split because we were both drowning in the same ocean, 3 feet apart, each of us so sure we were alone that neither one could see the other going under. I spoke love in the only language I knew. Silence, provision, endurance. I'll carry it so you don't have to. And she needed the only language that could have saved her. Presence. Words. I'm here. I'm hurting too. Don't let go of my hand. And the harder I loved her my way, the more unloved she felt. The more she reached, the more I pulled back to protect her from the mess of me. 2 people, both reaching, both loving as hard as they could, in languages the other couldn't read. That's not a marriage that failed because nobody tried. That's a marriage that broke because both people tried with everything they had, and it still wasn't enough, because trying isn't the same as being understood. And that's the part that had haunted us both for 4 years. Not that it was impossible, that it was so nearly, achingly possible. One conversation, one open door, one I'm scared too, Delia. We were always just one sentence away from saving it, and we never said the sentence, and it cost us a whole life. We could have. I started. Don't. She held up her hand. Her face was wet and fierce. Don't say it. I've said it to myself 1,000 times. We could have. If only. All we had to do was. It doesn't help, Wes. It just cuts. She was right. It just cuts. For a while neither of us said anything. We just stood there in the cold, breathing clouds, 2 people who'd finally told each other the truth, and now had to stand inside the wreckage of how long it took. Then, quietly, I asked the question that had been under everything all night. Delia, who is he? She looked back at the car, at the small sleeping shape buckled in the dark, and something in her whole body changed, softened, opened, filled with a light I'd never seen on her before, not even in our best years. A light I didn't have a name for until I saw it on her face right then, aimed at that sleeping boy. His name is Theo, she said. He came to me through the county, almost 2 years ago. She wiped her face, but she was almost smiling now, a wet, trembling smile. It was supposed to be a weekend, just a weekend placement, the foster system. They needed an emergency home, just a couple days, they said. I'd signed up a year before, after the divorce, after I stopped. She glanced at me, after I gave up on the idea that I'd ever have the family I wanted the regular way. I signed up to foster because I thought, at least I can love a kid who needs it for a weekend. At least I can do that much. She took a breath. They dropped him off on a Friday. He was 18 months old. He didn't cry. That's the thing I'll never forget. Babies that age, you take them from everything they know. They scream the house down. He didn't make a sound. He just looked at me with these huge eyes, like he was already used to being handed to strangers, like he already knew not to expect anyone to stay. Her voice wobbled, and something in me just broke open, because I knew that feeling, Wes. I knew exactly what it felt like to reach for someone and have them not reach back. And I looked at this baby who'd already learned to stop reaching at 18 months old. And I thought, not you. Not on my watch. Somebody is going to stay for you if it kills me. The tears were coming down my face again. I didn't stop them. The weekend became a week, she said. The week became a month. His case. There was nobody. No family who could take him. And every month they'd ask if I could keep him a little longer. And every month I said yes. And somewhere in there I stopped thinking of it as keeping him a little longer. She looked at me and her chin trembled. The adoption finalizes in the spring, Wes. April, he's going to be mine. Legally, forever, no more a little longer. My son. He's not ours, I said softly, understanding it fully now. But he's yours. He's mine, she said, and a tear ran down and she let it. The baby we lost, I lost by biology, by something nobody could stop. And I spent 2 years so angry that the family I wanted got taken from me. She looked back at the car. And then a stranger handed me an 18-month-old who didn't cry. And I found out the family you lose isn't the only family there is. Sometimes there's one you get to choose, one that chooses you back. And I thought, of course. I build things for a living. I, of all people, should have known. A family isn't only the thing you're given and can lose. A family is a thing you can build, board by board, choice by choice. She'd figured out with her whole broken heart the one truth I'd been too locked up to see. The extra door, I said suddenly. At the diner. He said he drew a house with an extra door and asked me to build it. And Delia made a sound that was half a laugh and half a sob, and she reached into the pocket of her green coat and she pulled something out, a piece of paper, folded into quarters, soft at the creases, worn thin, the way paper gets when it's been carried a long time and unfolded over and over. He made this at daycare, she said, a month ago. Her hands were shaking. I've carried it in my pocket every day since. I don't even know why. I couldn't put it down. She held it out to me across the snow. I took it. My fingers were numb from the cold, but I felt the softness of it, the worn creases. I unfolded it under the streetlight. A child's drawing. Crayon. A house. Lopsided, one wall taller than the other. A triangle roof. A chimney, with a scribble of smoke. A yellow sun with lines coming out of it, jammed up in the corner, the way kids always put the sun. 3 stick figures out front. A tall one with long hair, Delia. A small one, Theo, with a scribble of brown on his head. And, my breath stopped. There was a third figure, taller, standing a little apart from the other two, like it hadn't arrived yet. Like it was walking toward them from off the edge of the page, and on the side of the house, deliberate, careful, drawn darker than everything else, like he'd pressed the crayon down hard to make sure it mattered. A second door. A door on the side of the house that led nowhere. An extra door. A door with no one coming through it. Yet, I asked him why he drew an extra door, Delia said, and her voice was barely holding. I said, "Baby, houses only need 1 door. Why did you draw 2? And he looked at me like I was the silly one, and he said, "She had to stop." She pressed her lips together. She breathed. He said, "For when more people come, Mama." I stood in the snow holding a 3-year-old's drawing of a house with a door left open for someone who hadn't arrived yet. And I understood that the third figure walking toward them from the edge of the page was a person that little boy had never met and was already saving a door for, and I could not speak. I could not say one single word. I just stood there and cried, openly, 40 years old, in a diner parking lot, over a crayon drawing, while my breath came out in broken white clouds. "He's been drawing that door for a month," Delia whispered. "Every house. Always an extra door. I kept looking at it, Wes, every day in my pocket. And I told myself it meant nothing. He's 3. Kids draw anything." She wiped her face. "And then tonight, I was walking past a diner, and I saw your name on a chalkboard, and something in me I couldn't walk past it. I couldn't. It was like the door in my pocket pulled me through the real one. I looked up from the drawing. She was watching me, terrified and hopeful and wrecked, all of it at once. "Why did you keep it in your pocket?" I asked, barely a whisper. "For a whole month. Why?" And Delia looked at me for a long, long moment. The snow, the streetlight, the sleeping boy, 4 years and a green coat and an extra door. "I think you know why," she said. And I think if I say it out loud right now, in this parking lot, at 10 o'clock at night, I'll ruin it by rushing it. She folded her arms, not defensive this time, holding herself together. I have a little boy in that car, Wesley. I don't get to be reckless anymore. It's not just my heart I can break now. It's his, and he's already been handed to enough people who didn't stay. I know, I said. You should be careful. You should be so careful. But, she said, and she stepped forward, and she reached out, and she folded my fingers back around the drawing, closing my hand over it, giving it to me, letting me keep it. Come in the spring, she said, to the adoption, in April, at the courthouse. Not as anything yet. I'm not saying, I can't say what this is yet. But come, be there. Let's start with you being a man who shows up. That's all. Just show up, the way you couldn't 4 years ago. And we'll go slow, and we'll leave the door open, and nobody has to rush through it. Her voice broke into something that was almost a laugh through the tears. You're good with doors, at least. You could hang it right. I hang a very good door, I said, and my voice shattered clean in half on the last word. And she laughed. That laugh, that same laugh, the one I'd recognized across 4 years and a diner. And it turned into crying, and my laugh turned into crying, and we stood there in the snow, two people who had drowned 3 feet apart, finally reaching toward each other across all that dark water. Both of us soaked and freezing and cracked wide open, and for the first time in 4 years, not alone. She got in the car. She rolled down the window before she pulled away, and the streetlight lit up her wet face, and she said one more thing. And it was the thing that would carry me all the way through the winter, all the way to April, all the way to a courthouse hallway where a small boy would change my life forever. He asked about you, she said. Theo, on the drive over here tonight, before we ever saw your name. Out of nowhere. He asked if I ever had somebody before, and I said yes. Once. A long time ago. A man who built things. She swallowed. And Wes. I didn't tell it as the cold part. The way I've told it for 4 years. The he never cared part. Somewhere along the way I stopped telling it that way. I don't even know when. Her chin trembled. I think a piece of me was already keeping a door open too. I just didn't know what for. And she rolled up the window, and she drove away into the snow. Small red taillights getting smaller, and I stood alone in the empty parking lot at 10 o'clock at night on my 40th birthday. But I want to tell you something. I was not alone the way I'd been alone 3 hours ago. 3 hours ago I'd been a man in a locked house, calling it peace. Now I was a man standing in the snow holding a crayon drawing of a house with an extra door, with a whole winter to get through, and a reason, for the first time in 4 years, to get through it. I looked down at the drawing one more time under the streetlight. The third figure, walking in from the edge of the page, toward the door left open just for him, and I made a promise, right there in the cold, to a sleeping boy who'd already saved a door for me before he ever knew my name. I'm going to walk through it, I thought. This time, I'm going to walk all the way through. I didn't know yet how hard the winter would be. I didn't know what was waiting in April, that a phone call I was terrified to make would come first, that there was one more locked door in my life I hadn't opened yet, one more person I'd let drift away in my silent years, and that Theo's little hand would be the thing that finally made me dial the number. But that's the next part of the story. For now, I just folded the drawing back along its soft, worn creases, and I put it in my pocket, right over my heart, where Delia had carried it for a month, and I walked home through the snow. And for the first time in 4 years, the house I walked home to didn't feel quite so empty. Because I wasn't walking home to nothing anymore. I was walking home to April. The drawing stayed in my pocket all winter. I want to tell you what a man does with a second chance when he's spent 4 years believing he didn't deserve one. Because it isn't what you'd think. It isn't fireworks. It's small. It's terrifying. It's 100 little doors you have to make yourself walk through, one at a time, when every instinct you own is screaming at you to stay locked inside where it's safe. The first door was a phone call. I sat at my kitchen table 3 nights after my birthday, with my phone in my hand and my brother's name on the screen, and I could not make my thumb press the button. Isn't that something? A grown man, 40 years old, I'd asked a woman to let me back into her life, but I couldn't call my own brother. Because Dean and I hadn't really talked in 4 years. Not talked. He'd call, I'd say I'm fine, we'd hang up. Every I'm fine, another brick in the wall. And now the wall was so high I didn't know if my voice could even get over it. I almost put the phone down. I almost told myself I'd do it tomorrow. That's how it happens, you know. That's how you lose a whole family. Never all at once. Always tomorrow, I'll reach out tomorrow. Until one day you look up and it's been 4 years and the silence has a life of its own. But then I looked at the drawing on the table. The house. The extra door. For when more people come, Mama. And I thought, a 3-year-old I met once is braver than I am. A little boy who's been handed to strangers his whole life still draws a door for people who haven't come yet. Still believes somebody's coming. Still leaves the light on. And I was going to sit here and be too scared to call my own brother? I pressed the button. It rang twice. Then Dean's voice. Careful. Surprised. Because I never called. I never called first. Not in 4 years. Wes? Everything okay? And that right there? Everything okay? That told me everything. My own brother couldn't imagine I'd call him just to call. He assumed something was wrong. That's what I'd trained him to think. That Wesley only surfaces in an emergency. Yeah, I said. And my voice was shaking. Yeah, everything's... Dean, I need to tell you some things. And I need you to just let me get through them, okay? Because if I stop, I won't start again. Silence on the line. Then, quiet. Okay, bud. I'm here. I'm here. 2 words. He'd probably been ready to say them for 4 years. I just never gave him the chance. So I told him. All of it. The baby, the truck in the parking lot, the yellow room I couldn't walk past, how I'd disappeared into work and called it strength, how I'd said I'm fine to him 1,000 times because the truth was too heavy to hand to anybody, how I was sorry, so sorry, that I'd made him into a brother who thought a phone call from me had to mean a disaster. And do you know what my brother did, 2,000 miles away in Tucson? He cried. This big tough man, Dean, fixed diesel engines. Dean once drove 11 hours straight to help me move a table saw. Dean sat on the other end of that phone and cried. And then he said the thing that broke me open all over again. I thought you didn't need me, he said. All this time, Wes, you always sounded so fine. I figured you'd built this whole life, and you just didn't have room for your screw-up brother in it anymore. I stopped calling as much, because I thought I was bugging you. I thought you wanted to be left alone. I did want to be left alone, I said. That was the whole problem. I wanted the one thing that was killing me. We talked for 2 hours. 2 hours. The longest we'd talked since we were kids sharing a room. And near the end, he said, the party, your 40th, when I texted you next year. He stopped. Was that, Wes, was that a real party? Did nobody came, I said. There was no point hiding it anymore. Hiding it was the disease. I sat in a diner alone with a cake that spelled my name wrong. I heard him breathe out slow. God, he said. God. Wes, why didn't you say it was a real party? I'd have flown out. You know I'd have flown out. I know, I said. That's exactly why I didn't say it. I couldn't stand the idea of somebody coming because I finally admitted I needed them to. That's the dumbest thing I ever heard, my brother said. And then, softer, that's the saddest dumb thing I ever heard. And we both laughed. The wet kind. The kind that's mostly crying wearing a coat. Before we hung up, Dean said, April, the adoption thing. You said it's in April. I could hear him already scrolling his calendar. I'm coming. Don't argue. I'm coming to stand next to you. 4 years I should have been standing next to you. I'm starting in April. I hung up the phone and I sat in my kitchen and I put my face in my hands and I wept. But I want you to understand. It wasn't the same weeping as my birthday. On my birthday, I wept because I was empty. That night, I wept because something was pouring back in. And a heart that's been dry for 4 years doesn't know how to take the water gently. It just floods. One door open, a whole winter of doors to go. The Sundays started in January. Delia texted me on a Wednesday. Theo keeps asking about the cake man. Sunday dinner? 5 p.m. No promises. Just dinner. And I read it 40 times, and I stood in the shower the next morning practicing what I'd say to a 3-year-old, which is a thing a nervous man does when he's forgotten that children don't need you to have a script. They just need you to show up and get down on the floor. That first Sunday I stood on her porch. She had a little house on the east side, blue with white trim, a wreath still up from Christmas, and I raised my hand to knock, and I noticed her bottom porch step was cracked. Split right down the middle, a nail lifting up, the kind of thing somebody trips on in the dark carrying a sleeping kid. And before I even knocked, I was already kneeling down looking at it, already fixing it in my head. Because that's the one language I've always been fluent in. I can't always say I love you, but I can make sure the step you carry your son over won't ever crack under your foot. The door opened before I knocked. Delia stood there in an apron, and Theo shot out from behind her legs, and looked up at me, and his whole face detonated with joy, and he yelled, "The cake man!" and grabbed my leg like he'd known me his whole life, and I put my hand on his wild static hair, and over his head, Delia looked at me kneeling there by her broken step, and she didn't even have to ask. She just smiled, small and sad and hopeful all at once, and said, "You already found something to fix, didn't you?" "Your step's cracked," I said. Somebody could trip, carrying him, in the dark. And something moved across her face, because she understood. She always understood. She knew that your step's cracked was the only way I knew how to say, "I've been thinking about you carrying him safely for 4 years' worth of Sundays I haven't had yet." I fixed the step that first Sunday, in my good clothes. Delia brought me the toolbox she'd kept, my old toolbox. She'd kept it 4 years, and neither of us said anything about that. But I noticed, and she saw me notice. The Sundays became the shape of my life. I'd come at 5. I'd fix something, because there was always something, and because it was the bridge I walked across to get closer, one repair at a time. The porch step, then the railing, then the kitchen drawer that stuck, then the closet door that wouldn't sit right on its track, and when I planed it smooth and it finally swung true, and clicked shut soft and perfect, Theo clapped his hands and yelled, "It works!" Like I'd done magic, and I had to go stand in the yard for a minute, because nobody had clapped for me in 4 years, and a 3-year-old clapped because a door closed right. Theo attached himself to me like I was something he'd been waiting for. He'd help me work, which meant handing me the wrong tool with total confidence. A spoon when I asked for a screwdriver, a sock, once a single grape, and I thanked him for every single one. I thanked him for the grape. He'd sit on the bottom step I'd fixed and narrate my work to Bear the blanket. "The cake man is fixing it, Bear. He fixes everything. Don't be scared. Don't be scared." He said it to a blanket, but I heard it land somewhere deep in me, in the locked-up room, in the part that had been scared for 4 years. And Delia and I, we went slow. She made us go slow, and she was right to. We were 2 people who'd drowned once. You don't dive back in the water laughing. You wade. You test your weight. You learn to trust that the other person will reach back this time before you let go of the shore. But every Sunday, the water got a little warmer. She started telling me about her 4 years. The foster classes. The night Theo ran a fever of 104, and she sat up till dawn in the ER alone, and swore she'd never let anyone hand him off again. I told her about mine, the real ones, not the "I'm fine" version. The nights the silence in my house got so loud I'd drive to the shop at 2 a.m. just to hear a saw run. We gave each other the true stories, the ones we'd been too proud and too broken to share the first time around. One Sunday in March, after Theo fell asleep on the couch between us during a movie, his feet in her lap and his head on my arm, Delia looked at me over his sleeping body and said, very quietly, "I was so scared to text you that first Sunday. I read it 40 times before I answered. I almost didn't send it." She looked down at Theo, but he drew another house that week, another extra door, and I thought, my son keeps leaving a door open for somebody. Maybe I should be brave enough to actually open the real one. And I looked at her, and at the little boy asleep across both our laps, connecting us like a bridge, and I felt the last brick in the wall I'd built come loose. Not fall, just loosen, just enough to let the light through. Then it was April. The courthouse was all marble and echo, big and cold and official, the kind of place that makes your footsteps sound like they belong to somebody more important than you. I wore a tie. I hadn't worn a tie in 4 years. The last time was probably a funeral, and I don't want to think about which one. Dean flew in from Tucson the night before and slept on my couch and hugged me so hard at the airport that a stranger smiled at us, and in the morning, he straightened my tie in the courthouse hallway, like Dad used to, and said, "You clean up okay, bud," and neither of us could talk for a second. Marcus came too. I'd called him in February. Another door. Another 2-hour phone call. Another "why didn't you tell me, Wes, I'd have been there." He drove 3 hours to stand in that hallway. 2 years of silence. And he crossed it in an afternoon because I finally asked him to. That's the thing nobody tells you about the walls you build. You think they're permanent. You think the silence is forever. And then you make one phone call and find out the people on the other side were just waiting the whole time for you to knock. We stood in that echoing hallway. Me, my brother, my best man. The 3 men I'd let drift into silence. All of us together again, because a little boy drew a door. And then, down at the far end of the hall, the big doors opened, and Delia came out holding Theo's hand. He was in a tiny gray suit. A tiny suit. Somebody had put this 3-year-old in a tiny suit and slicked down his wild static hair with water, and it was already fighting back. One cowlick standing straight up in rebellion. The adoption was final. It was done. He was hers. Legally. Forever. No more a little longer. Her son. On paper and in every other way that had ever mattered. Theo saw me from the far end of that long marble hall, and his whole face broke open, and he pulled his hand out of his mother's, and he ran. He ran the entire length of that courthouse hallway in his tiny suit, arms pumping, shoes slapping the marble, so loud a bailiff turned to look, and he ran straight at me, and he yelled, at the top of his lungs, echoing off all that cold marble so the whole building could hear it. The cake man came. He came. He came. And he hit my legs like a small warm truck. And I picked him up. Because that's what you do. When something runs to you with its whole heart, across a long, cold hall, you catch it. You catch it and you hold on. I'd spent 4 years being a man who let things run away while I stood frozen. And now I was a man who caught the thing that ran to him, and lifted it up, and held on. He came. Out of everything that little boy could have shouted, he shouted he came. Because in Theo's whole short life, the biggest thing a person could do, the most magical, impossible, wonderful thing, was to come, to show up, to be there. He'd been handed to strangers his whole life and learned they don't stay. And here was one who came, and kept coming, every Sunday, and fixed the step, and closed the doors right. I looked over his shoulder, holding him, and Delia was standing halfway down the hall where he'd left her, one hand pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face, watching her son in his tiny suit wrap his arms around the neck of the man who'd walked back through the door. And she didn't look away. 4 years ago, she drove away from a man made of stone, and now she stood in a courthouse and watched that same man hold her son, and she didn't look away, and I understood that some doors, once you finally walk through them, you never have to walk back out. We built the mudroom that summer, off the back of her little blue house, our house, though it took us until autumn to say that word out loud. A small addition, nothing fancy, a bench for boots, hooks low enough for a little boy to reach, cubbies for mittens with their clips so they'd never dangle lost off a sleeve again, and a door, a real one, a second door into that house, exactly like the one Theo drew, on the side, where he'd pressed the crayon down hard to make it matter. I hung it myself. I measured it 4 times, planed it slow, set the hinges by hand until it swung true and silent and clicked shut, soft as a held breath. The best door I ever hung in my life. Theo helped. He handed me a screwdriver, and a sock, and 1 grape, and I thanked him for all 3. When it was done, he ran through it. In one side, out the other, laughing, over and over. Testing his door, the one he'd drawn a year before he ever had a place to put it. For when more people come. And more people came. Dean flew out that Christmas and didn't sleep on a couch. We made up the spare room. Marcus started driving up for Sundays. Sorrel sent a card. The house that used to hold 1 woman and 1 boy who'd both learned not to expect anyone to stay. It filled up. It filled up with people who came and kept coming. I never moved back into an empty house again. The green coat did it, in the end. Delia left it at my place one Sunday in the fall, draped over my kitchen chair, on purpose, I knew it was on purpose. Because Delia never forgot anything in her life. I texted her, "You left your coat," and she texted back 2 words that I have kept in my phone and will keep until I die. I know. We married the next spring. Small. In the backyard by the mudroom door, Theo carried the rings on a little pillow and dropped them in the grass, and we all got down on our knees to find them. All of us laughing. And that was the most us any wedding could ever have been. Everyone on their knees in the grass. Together. Searching. Finding what was lost. Right where we'd let it fall. I need to tell you one more thing. A while later, on a quiet night, Delia and I sat on that fixed porch step, with the whole thing behind us. The drowning, the silence, the 4 years, the diner, the drawing, the door. And I finally said the name. Our first son. The one we lost in the yellow room. I said his name out loud to her. The name we'd chosen and never got to use. The name I couldn't speak for 4 years, because speaking it made the losing real. I said it, and I didn't go silent. I didn't run to the shop. I sat right there and I held her hand, and I grieved him out loud. In words. Next to the woman who'd lost him too. The one thing I couldn't do the first time. The one thing that would have saved us if I'd only known how. And she held my hand, and she cried. And she said, "Thank you. Thank you for finally letting me not carry him alone." That's the whole thing, in the end. That's what it was always about. Not being carried. Not being fixed. Just not being alone with the heaviest thing. Just someone reaching back when you reach. Theo is 7 now. He still draws houses. But they don't have an extra door anymore. I asked him about it once. I said, "Bud, you used to always draw 2 doors. How come you only draw 1 now?" And he looked at me like I was the silly one. That same look from the diner, a lifetime ago. And he said, "I don't need the extra door anymore, Dad. Everybody already came. Dad, everybody already came. I build things for a living. Kitchens, cabinets, staircases, whole homes for other families. For 4 years I built beautiful rooms and sat alone in an empty one. And I called it peace, and it was just a locked door with me on the wrong side of it. But a little boy who'd been left his whole life taught a grown man the only thing worth knowing. That a family isn't the thing you lose, it's the thing you're allowed to build again. If you're brave enough to leave the door open, and stand in the doorway, and wait. Nobody came to my 40th birthday, but the bell over the door rang anyway, and everybody came after. They just needed me to open the door. Now let me ask you something before you go. Something I want you to actually sit with tonight. Wesley didn't lose his family because he stopped loving them. He lost them because he loved them in a language they couldn't hear. And he was so afraid of being a burden that he called his loneliness strength until it nearly swallowed him whole. So here's my question for you, and please, tell me in the comments. I read them, and I promise you're not the only one who needs to say it out loud. Who is the person you've been telling, "I'm fine" to, when the truth is, you've just been too scared to let them see you're not? And what would happen? What might come back through the door? If today, you finally picked up the phone and told them the truth. Don't wait 4 years to find out. Wesley almost did. Some doors don't stay open forever, but so many more of them are still open right now, tonight, just waiting for you to knock. If this story moved you, if Wesley's journey touched something real in you, tap that notification bell right now and join our family here, so you never miss a story that reminds you you're not as alone as the silence tells you you are. We tell these stories for the people brave enough to feel them. That's you. Stay with us. And remember this. Wherever you are tonight, the walls you built to keep the pain out are the same walls keeping the love from getting in. You are never as far gone as your loneliness whispers. It is never too late to pick up the phone. It is never too late to fix the step, to hang the door, to say the name out loud. The people who love you are not gone. Most of them are just on the other side of a silence you're allowed to break. So be brave enough to be seen. Reach out, even when your hand is shaking, because somewhere, someone is drawing a house with an extra door, and they're leaving it open for you. Go knock. They've been waiting.